Well, let me start by saying I noticed that my slot was due for half an hour, and I think if I spoke for half an hour, we really would need the NHS. That was meant to get a laugh, by the way. I've been in government 6 months, and I wanted to say that it is a pleasure, a privilege for me to be here, because, and I'm sure you've heard it from other speakers, but my wife had breast cancer, my son has had congenital heart problems since the age of 2, and I owe a huge debt of gratitude to the NHS, and so I wanted to say thank you. The second thing is that I think the NHS is something that we should be incredibly powerfully proud of in the UK. I think it's an enterprise, an institution, and something that is a huge part of the brand of Britain now. And I think for those of you that are actively involved in the NHS and work in it, I don't think you realise how much the power of the brand is spreading internationally. I had lunch today with a very senior American senator who was going on and on about British healthcare and how good it is. And I contrast that with maybe a decade ago when the feeling was very, very different. So I think that from my perspective as the Minister of Trade, I think this is something that we should be selling more. I think that it is something that can have a hugely powerful impact on the economy. And I do believe that it is something that we need to be exporting and looking into ways in which we can commercially take parts of what we do in the NHS and sell internationally. But at the risk, listen, it's Friday afternoon and it's been a couple of days, and so some of you, you're thinking, I've got the slot on a Friday afternoon that could either kill the whole thing or... So I thought I'd talk a little bit about innovation and unexpected things. And I thought I'd start with a story that I heard at lunch. And it's a story about a gentleman who was living in the States who had a neighbour who was a scruffy guy who basically was starting a new fund. And he didn't seem to work at all. He spent his whole day looking after his family. And the neighbour, great friend of his, said, you know, this chap, Warren Buffett, he keeps on calling on me to, he wants me to invest $1,000 in his fund. And basically, this gentleman said, look, when he comes round, he said to the whole family, when he comes round next time to the house, switch the lights off, let's pretend we're away. And so, cut a long story short, they didn't invest, and the $1,000 would now be 1.3 billion. Never judge a book by its cover. The second story is that there's a company in the UK called Innocent Food Drinks. And Innocent, created by 3 individuals, 3 young men, they were actually trying lots of different things, and lots of different, there were, you know, 2 of them were engineering graduates, and they were trying lots of different ways of making money, all of which had failed. And so their latest venture had gone belly up, and they were at home in one of the apartments of one of the flats of the guys, and basically one of the mums, feeling so sorry for the lads, had said, they bought them a blender, and so that they could make some drinks, and they went out, brought some fruit, and they put it in the blender, and they suddenly said, hey, this drink is pretty good. That was a smoothie, and they went out the next day and went to a shop, quick copy, got it. You may have heard the story. They called it Innocent because they were very innocent, and now it's, you know, the company's got a couple of £100 million of turnover. The moral of that one is that basically you can be doing something, and innovation is all about having an open mind and not being closed to new ideas. I suppose the third story is that I was a banker working for a bank called Standard Chartered, And everybody told me, firstly, not to work for the company, and secondly, that the company wouldn't last. I think that 15, 16 years later, the company had done brilliantly, and I'd been on the board 12 years. And the moral of that is that I had to convince people that making mistakes was okay. And some of you will argue, well, you can't make mistakes in the NHS because you're dealing with people's lives. I would argue that basically it doesn't matter what type of enterprise you are working for, people have to embrace continuous improvement. They have to embrace continuous learning. I am 56 years of age. By the way, I've noticed that the noise is not only inside but outside. I'm 56 years of age. I've recently gone into politics, and I am totally, and this is being recorded, on occasions out of my comfort zone, notably more recently. And I suppose the moral is you never stop learning. You never, ever stop learning. And it doesn't matter what enterprise you work for, you never stop improving. And I think the challenge for all of you and for me and for everybody is to create the culture in your individual institutions, in your individual little bits, that openly embraces change, and to make sure that you are the sort of leaders that people look to you and say, they really encourage new ideas. They really are the sort of people that welcome change. And the thing about the NHS for me is that it has so much creativity within it. It has 1.3 million people who are continuously creating new ideas. And so one of the challenges, I think, and maybe there'll be questions on this, is how do you harness that? How do you take these new ideas to continuously make it more efficient? And how do you cut the permafrost which stops change? My view is that in government, in the NHS, in Tesco, where I was on the board for a number of years, in Standard Chartered, which I ran for a long time, it doesn't matter where you work, it doesn't matter who you talk to, in every type of enterprise, there is a permafrost that is trying to stop change. There's always somebody in the NHS who would say to you, we can't do this, it won't work, we've tried it before, or, more notably, they say, thank you, we'll look at that in due course. I've already had, when I became a minister, this is being recorded, so I'm going to change the story slightly. Basically, I'd been a minister in the government for about a couple of days, and I had this great idea on how to change something in the department. And the civil servants came in and they said, and it was that magical moment when they said, yes, Minister, that's a very good idea. We will look into it. I've been there 6 months, and I'm still waiting for the reply. So I suppose one of my reflections is that this is something in the NHS that must be a challenge. There must be, with so many different types of regional approaches, with so many people, with 1.3 million people, and with such a large enterprise, I do believe that one of the big challenges for the NHS is creating a culture that truly embraces change. And then I think the other thing about life in general these days is, and I always say this to the department I'm responsible for, if I had stood up a few years ago and said that a wave was going to come and wash away parts of Asia, or that a plane would come into our building in New York, into our data center, and if I'd said that New Orleans wouldn't exist, and if I had said that America would have a black president, people would have said it just isn't going to happen. I think part of life today is we've got to expect the unexpected. And that means that we've got to create an atmosphere of innovation and openness to change.